What is up, Fantasy League enjoyers? I sure hope that you had as good a turnout as I did, as I managed to get a top 10% finish. Very happy with this. I discussed in my previous video, I felt like I was going for a couple of gamble sort of picks, but I was going for it purely off the basis of value, and Rain was just too cheap. I think he was 193k for me to justify turning my nose up at a guy that, if you've been watching these videos consistently, you'll know that I do love Rain as a player. Like, I pick him a lot. I couldn't really justify going for Faze as of late because of how up and down they've been, but when I see Rain at 193k, I'm like, yes please, I'll be having some of that. And he gave me a good turnaround. 66 points for 193k is money well spent. A lot of people went for Spirit, a lot of people went for G2, and although G2 did definitely bring it back because of some of their performances and how one-sided they were, Spirit got absolutely crushed. Anyone that picked Spirit players was automatically just out of the running for top sort of 30-40%, unless you've nailed the rest of your picks. They got annihilated, and I'll talk about that again in a few moments' time. Going for Na'Vi has once again paid off very well for me. Bit in particular, phenomenal, 133 points, absolute beast worthy. There's a couple of more players I could have gone for actually. Ema had some very good performances as well over on Na'Vi, and he was a relatively decent price. So anyone that went for like Bit and Ema is rolling in the gold right now. And then Jimmy got me 54, surprisingly the least amount of points out of anybody on my team, and that is really surprising because I thought he actually would be a bit of a bargain pick, floating around sort of like the low 200s. He did get me 54 points, which is always a nice turnout, but I was maybe expecting a little bit more, but I can't complain, guys. Top 10% is wonderful. We take that all day, every day. That's put me into 5th position, outright 5th. I've leapt up the scoreboard after a one good game, as it's so early on, as I said in the last. Just takes you to strike gold a couple of times. You're going to fly up the ratings, but on the other side of that, if you have a couple of stinkers, you're going to go and plummet down the ratings as well. So we got to get consistency in here and make sure that we don't get too overzealous. So in terms of the playoffs, we have 6 teams, all very solid. One is not like the others. One is a huge surprise compared to the others, and of course that is Saw. The Portuguese boys who did so much back at the RMRs into the major, but since have basically offered nothing, if we're being completely honest. They went from being the best of 3 kings to being everyone's punching bag, and it was really sad to see because they had some crazy talent on that roster, loads of experience as well with Muterus as the IGL, but when you have like, you know, Arizdose and Ujerks and Story on a team like that, you're like, how are you guys getting dismantled by everybody right now? So it's really cool to see them bounce back. Maybe this is a bit of a second wind. Maybe it's a fluke one-off. Who knows? What we do know, though, is their run to this point is legit. They beat G2 in the first game, which was a huge shock, alongside the Mongols beating Spirit, which set up that game I'll talk about in a couple moments. That was a shock to the system, and a lot of people after that first day were wincing as they looked at their Fantasy League picks. And then Saw went and beat the Mongols as well, 2-1, and even took a map off Na'Vi, who cruised past Pain and Astralis 2-0. So Saw getting through to this stage, it's not a fluke. They've had some very tough teams, and they've been battling hard to get here. This is not an easy run by any stretch of the imagination. And so, very impressive by them. Can they beat Faze? I'm going to say probably not, in all honesty, because although Faze have had their own struggles, they've had their own strife, their own ups and downs, when you look at the teams that they've actually been beat by here, it is Vitality, right? So, fair enough. They lost to Vitality 2-1. They then went down to the lower brackets. They beat Falcons. They beat Liquid twice. A closer game in the second one than the first, but they only got beat by the Falcons, by the Vitality, pardon me, and even then it was a 3-mapper, and Vitality looked really good. They crushed Mouse as well. So I think FaZe coming into this are in like an even sort of keel in terms of their performances in the actual play-in bracket, but I think that they are just at a much higher level than Saw are. I could very well eat my words on this one. The problem is, though, that if FaZe do go through to Vitality, it's going to be another potential close game, and they could lose out once again. So, do I want to go for FaZe players? We'll have to wait and see what the prices are looking like. Now, G2 moved to a play against Mouse, and this is a fantastic quarterfinals prospect. This honestly could be a grand finals in another tournament quite easily. They absolutely demolished Spirit, and it wasn't even close. Actually, let me double check the scoreline on this one. Yeah, 13-3, 13-1. It was such a stomping, such a brutal, savage beating that Donk was 0.64 come the end of this series, and everyone else on Spirit was below him. It was a complete beatdown. We have not seen Spirit be manhandled that badly with this roster before. It just hasn't happened. They're normally the team doing this. They're normally the plow. This time they were the plowed, and it was just so difficult to watch. G2 were like on a different level. It wasn't even a case of like Spirit played really bad. No, Spirit played poorly and G2 played fantastically. It was an incredible game. And so they catapult their way through. They beat Astralis 2-1. They beat Pain 2-0. And you could argue that's a bit of an easier run past the Spirit game, which certainly wasn't easy, in terms of on paper at least, than maybe a Saw. But I still think the nature and how they just beat down Spirit was so impressive to me that I can't really see Mouse beating them at this point. Like, it was tough. It was a tough watch. So I'm in a very interesting spot here come the picks, because we're going to look at the prices, right? You can see the team that I've got here that I'm going to be locking in, but I just wanted to explain a few things, because no Mouse players is quite shocking for me personally. I normally always put a Mouse player in there, here or there, whether it's even a budget player. I'm not going to this time because G2 are looking so terrifying for me. And I'm also not going to go for any Vitality players, which could certainly come back to haunt me. The thought process on this is I want to pick two Na'Vi players because I've backed them multiple times, and Bit in particular has always given me a return. He's always been solid. Na'Vi right now are looking really good. Fantastic. Probably the best Counter-Strike we've seen them play. I'd even argue it's the better CS than what we saw them play when they won the major back in Copenhagen. So I feel very good about Na'Vi. Plus, they're going to get some points purely for being in the semi-finals and skipping a game. So you're guaranteed points if you pick Na'Vi to start off with. You're going to get yourself like 12 points between the two of them, which is a nice little buff. And then I wanted to go for a team that was in the quarterfinals with the potential to make it through to the finals and grind me out a bunch of points. And I felt like Faze's price here for Rops and Brokey were too good for me to pass up. It's the same kind of feeling I had about Rain in the previous segment, about him being 193k. It's like there's certain players, when you see them at certain prices, even if the prices are justified, and I think Rops' price is justified, he's not been consistent and he's not been at that level that we know he's capable of for a long time now. But you know the ceiling this guy has, and it only takes one or two big best of threes, and 198k is fantastic value for money. It is a bit of a gamble, no doubt. They got shut down by Vitality before in a 3-mapper. It's possible even if they beat Saw, it happens again and Lightning strikes twice. But it is a bit of a gamble, but I'm going to go for it, because if FaZe make the finals, you're going to get so many points for having these two on your team. It's going to be insane. And again, it went to 3 maps against Vitality. It wasn't a complete blowout 2-0. They did fight. We've seen signs of life from this FaZe team. It's not just been Rain that's playing really well, but the team has been playing solidly overall in this tournament. And then finally, I went for Snacks. I had the choice between Snacks and Shui, who are around the same price. But as I said, I fancy G2 are going to beat Mouse here. The way they've looked coming into this, they've been looking like they're hitting a different level. Nico's playing well. Hunter's had such a huge boost to his performances under Snacks' IGLing. And Mobs is also finding his way after a bit of a scrappy start to his G2 career. He's really starting to find his own now. So I think that G2 have a much better chance of winning in that game. And I'm also giving myself a little bit of a security net in the sense that if G2 do win against Mouse and they then beat Na'Vi, who they'll be facing against in the semi-finals, I at least have somebody in the grand finals at that point, right? Now, obviously, if Mouse come through and snowball and just steamroll to the finals, that's completely thrown out the window. But I've got like a bit of an insurance policy as far as I see it. And Snacks himself is capable of having big maps and performing well and getting some really impressive performances. I'm going to slap support on him because he's very high support percentage, like around 25%, pretty solid. Brokey on multi-fragger, Rops on the CT side defender role, eco-fragger for Alexi B. I was thinking to put a noob on him, but I decided not to because realistically, sometimes he does have good games, you know, and sometimes Ema may have a bit of an off one, and then he's not going to be bottom of the scoreboard, and you actually get in like minus points, and you're getting into some pretty murky territory. And then Bit for Headshot King, because This guy's 66% headshot ratio is absurd. That's one of the highest I've ever seen, especially for consistent performances. This isn't based off like 1 or 2 games. This is a lot of matches, and he's still hitting that very high percentage mark. So we'll see if I can strike twice here with some really good performances. It's very much dependent on Faze and Na'Vi performing, of course. And if Faze crash and burn and Na'Vi can be successful, I might still do okay. That's why I'm kind of going for this a little bit more. But we'll wait and see what happens. I'll see you in the next video, guys. Peace.